aim to wake up around the same time daily and aim to get light exposure soon after waking consistently. Do that for a couple weeks and you will notice a dramatic difference in how you feel.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the First Optimal podcast. We got another exciting episode today. Jillian Greaves is joining us today. Really excited about this because we try to blend different specialists, different expertise areas in the health and wellness space for the audience in hopes to, give a lot of really sound information out there that you can apply to your lives to help you. Jillian, is going to unpack a lot of different things in the space of functional nutrition today. She's a women's health specialist, worked through things like fertility, PCOS, irregular cycles, thyroid, GI issues. So a whole bunch of fun stuff in that space. But for the men out there too, if you're tuning in, and it's definitely going to be more of a discussion about, women and some of those things, but there's a lot of, some threads you can pull from that content as well for yourself and or for your significant other or other women in your life to kind of tune them into this episode. So thanks so much, Jillian, for joining us. I appreciate you jumping on today and taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I think we were chatting a little bit before. So you're South Carolina, right?
Yeah, in Charleston, South Carolina. I always hesitate when I say that because I lived in Massachusetts my whole life, lived, in Boston for the last 10 plus years and moved here a couple of years ago for better weather. But still getting used to saying that I actually live here.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, it's so for those who don't know, it's early November. I think this will come out in December, but as far as early November, what's the weather like in your area?
So I think it's going to be like high 70s, 80 today, which is really nice.
Yeah, here in Michigan, we're in the 40s with some nice freezing rain this morning. So that was awesome, but all good stuff.
I did my dietitian training at the University of Michigan, so lived there for a bit. And I didn't think there was anything worse than Boston winters until I lived in Michigan.
Yeah, it can be rough, but I will say, kind of similar. My experience was I didn't think anything could be worse than Michigan, and then I went to a Minnesota winter. That was like northern Minnesota. I had to go out there 3 times earlier in my career for one of the companies at their headquarters out there, and once was in December and twice was in February. And I'm just like, what is going on? Like, they really don't like me here. I'm like, why? Yeah, I'm going on this work conference in Minnesota in the middle of February.
Yeah.
And they had like all these destination spots they could have taken us to. They had like locations in Vegas and Arizona and California and beautiful on the water, Florida, all this stuff. And I'm like, thanks.
That's so funny.
Northern Minnesota. But anyways, so I thought it'd be good for the audience as we kind of jump in here. People can obviously follow you, and I encourage them to do that on Instagram or your other social platforms. A lot of good resources and guides that we're going to get into today. But I thought just, if you could walk through a little bit of your journey to where you are today. I especially, like to talk about not only your personal experiences, but also the formal and informal, education, one from practical and the real world experience, I think is really important, can be undervalued by some people. And then, conversely, just having to, go to, as you mentioned, University of Michigan and obviously had undergrad before that and to really dedicate your life to these topics. Cause I think it can be, it can be kind of cloudy out there in the social media / health influencer space where I'm going to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and assume they have the best of intentions. But sometimes you do get some information that's out there that's like, yeah, it's not really how the body works. Or you can tell this person's, a little too overzealous about that topic because that's not really going to be as effective as they're making it sound in that post, whatever it is. But nonetheless, grateful to have you on and someone who's, like I said, delving in the details here. So walk us through your journey a little bit.
Yeah. And to kick things off with just, who I am. And I'll tell you a little bit about my formal training or street cred before I get into the personal journey that led me here, but I'm an integrative functional medicine dietitian. I specialize in women's health. And really what me and my team do is support women with diving deeper, women specifically struggling with hormonal and digestive health symptoms. So we help women dive deeper and really understand the why they're experiencing symptoms, what imbalances in the body are driving these symptoms. And we utilize supportive nutrition, lifestyle, supplement strategies to really bring the body back to balance and to ideally support symptom resolution and a lot of resilience in the body. I think something that makes the work that we do a little bit different or unique in the functional medicine space is that we also put a really big emphasis on supporting women with having a healthy relationship with food and a healthy relationship with their body, which we feel can sometimes get lost in the functional medicine space a little bit. So that's really what we're doing in terms of supporting women. For formal training, I earned my undergraduate degree in nutrition at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I did my graduate degree in nutrition at Tufts University in Boston. While I was getting my graduate degree, I also worked in clinical nutrition research at the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging, working with different clinical nutrition research studies. And then I went to the University of Michigan for my dietitian training. So that's kind of my formal training that went into, kind of the education that I have. In terms of getting into the functional medicine space specifically, like many practitioners out there, there were some personal health challenges and struggles that I went through that, led me to really specialize in women's health and to seek out advanced training in integrative functional nutrition. So to make a very, very long story short, when I was in grad school and working in this busy clinical research setting, I was doing all the things that I thought were extremely healthy on paper. So I was, running half marathons, HIIT training 5 days a week. I was, eating predominantly a plant-based diet. And I was burning the candle at both ends with my schedule. And I started to experience a lot of symptoms that felt like they kind of came up out of the blue. So I was experiencing breakouts. I started experiencing eczema. My hair was thinning. I was really anxious. I was having trouble sleeping. I was bloated. And I had no idea why. Another big piece of this was I had also been on hormonal birth control for over 10 years. That I was put on it at a young age for, heavy periods and never questioned it again for a decade. So I started to experience these symptoms. And over the course of a couple years, I was really struggling to find support. Saw my PCP who basically said, your labs look normal. You're the picture of health. Go see a derm, get a, topical steroid for the eczema. Do you want anxiety medication? And, I was offered a whole variety of Band-Aids and tossed around from one provider to the next to essentially suppress the symptoms I was experiencing. And I was not willing to accept that. And I was not willing to accept that these symptoms were happening for no reason. So interestingly, when I was still in the thick of experiencing a lot of symptoms, I was in my dietitian training at the University of Michigan, and I had a preceptor in a cardiac rehab rotation that was trained through IFM and the Integrative Functional Medicine, kind of institute for anyone that doesn't know or isn't familiar with it. And she really opened my eyes to this entire world that I knew nothing about. And that's where I started to really explore and research functional medicine, functional nutrition more so. I also started to research female physiology and realized that I knew absolutely nothing about the female body, despite all the training that I had. And I also realized that I knew nothing about the birth control pill that I had been taking every day for over a decade, and started to learn that there can be some potential side effects with birth control and the long-term suppression of, hormones in our reproductive system. So I started, making changes on my own. I took myself off hormonal birth control, and everything went haywire. So
Mm.
my period didn't come back. And when it did, it was terrible, absolutely miserable. All of my symptoms flared and got worse. And, over the next, I would say, 2 years from that point, I was really immersing myself in learning about women's health, learning about functional nutrition, starting to go through, formal training, and essentially using myself as a guinea pig, and, running deeper lab tests, really overhauling, my nutrition, my workout routine, starting to support, my nervous system, my circadian rhythms, actually understanding why these symptoms were happening, and ultimately was able to resolve that entire laundry list of symptoms that I had been experiencing. And in conversations with friends and, colleagues and family, I realized, man, so many other women out there are struggling with the same thing. They have been on birth control since a young age, and they don't want to be on it anymore, but if they come off, their symptoms go haywire. They're experiencing miserable periods or bloating or anxiety, and they're just offered a pill. And that's when I really started to get more training and to really start to become incredibly passionate about ultimately providing women with the support that I so deeply wished I had had when I
Sure.
was in the trenches and struggling. Because my journey, had I had the right support, would not have spanned over many years. And so a big part of this was really wanting to help women get answers and to resolve their symptoms, to take back their life, and to not have to deal with symptoms and kind of hack it together on their own, for years and years.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And as you're talking through it, I mean, I think you're right, because you said, you started to realize there's so many stories of women going through this, and I can say, gosh, 70-80% of, you know, the female experts in their space that come on this podcast even have a story, similar to yours. I'm curious, if you were to speculate here a little bit, there's probably maybe two or three buckets, I guess I would say, that could be causing some of this. Maybe more than that. It's just the two or three that came to mind while you were talking. I'm just, maybe if we unpack your view and understanding on birth control first, I'd like to just for those out there, maybe we start with what actually is in it, what is it doing to you, and what are some of those things you learned that long-term use, how it's problematic and can cause issues. I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind kind of
Yeah.
walking through that first, because there's a couple of things I think that, I want to unpack further, but that's probably a good place to
Yeah.
start. I think it's confusing for a lot of women.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately there's different types of birth control out there. We have oral contraceptives, one of the most commonly prescribed oral contraceptive being a combined oral contraceptive, meaning there is synthetic estrogen and synthetic progestin in there, where this type of birth control is essentially shutting off our hormones, so shutting down the reproductive system. There's other forms of birth control in terms of the mini pill, which is progestin only. There's also, the IUD in terms of hormonal IUDs. There's the copper IUD. To speak to the oral contraceptive, the combined oral contraceptive, which again is the most common form of birth control. Again, this works by really shutting off your own hormones. And I want to preface my thoughts here by mentioning that I support and respect every woman's autonomy to make decisions around birth control that feel best for them. And
Mm.
it's not that I am anti-birth control. My big issue comes from the lack of informed
Formed.
consent
Yeah.
with recommending birth control. Women are put on birth control like, it's given out like candy. And especially for women at a young age where, oh, you have acne, oh, you have pain, period cramps, you have heavy periods, your cycle's irregular, any, women's health symptom under the sun, it's like birth control is the first line of intervention in our conventional healthcare system. And instead of asking the question why, or trying to understand why women are experiencing these symptoms, we just shut hormones off. And that's the issue that I have, because alongside that, women are also not given all of the information they need to be able to make those informed decisions. So I work with many women who've been on hormonal birth control for years and years and years, and they have no idea that their monthly withdrawal bleed is not an actual true period, and that they're not ovulating on the birth control pill. So there's even a lack of understanding of the basic mechanism of what birth control is doing. To add to that, birth control can contribute to other side effects. So we know that birth control depletes really important key nutrients, specifically nutrients like B vitamins, vitamin C, magnesium, selenium, a lot of these nutrients being very key for supporting hormones on a very basic level. We know that hormonal birth control also has some negative implications for our gut health and our gut microbiome in particular, in terms of inducing unwanted microbial changes that can contribute to symptoms. Birth control also does put a heavy burden on the liver, the gallbladder, can impact, bile and the detoxification or metabolism of both hormones and toxins that we're exposed to. And it also has implications for our stress hormones and our HPA axis. So those are some of the big ones. And again, there may be situations where women have all that information and decide like, yep, this is still the best tool for me right now. Awesome. I support you. However, I have yet to work with a woman that has, fully understood how birth control works and the potential side effects, which would also give women the ability to even just better support themselves if they did choose to be on birth control. So that's really my issue. And we see so many women in our practice that, we're put on birth control for symptom suppression. They want to come off it, but they feel stuck, like they can't, because then they have to deal with this laundry list of symptoms. Or women that have been on birth control for a long, period of time, they come off and they're ready to get pregnant or start a family and they have no period. Or there's all sorts of things going haywire. So there's a lot that we're up against when it comes to birth control in terms of lack of informed consent and it really just being given out left and right for any women's health ailment or symptom.
Yeah, it almost seems like if we were giving, testosterone to, teenage boys for some of the similar issues, right? It's just, yeah, it's very strange the more you look at it. But I'm curious too, to like, if in a perfect world, if you were to make the informational pamphlet about like nutrition and birth control, if you were just to pick your top 3 to 5 things that every woman should know about nutrition, if they're on birth control or considering using it for whatever use case is being prescribed, what would be those things that maybe they want to adjust? And I know we're painting with a broad brush here, but just maybe some things they would adjust in the diet to mitigate against some of those micronutrients that are getting pulled out, or things to help with all the other issues that you mentioned that can happen from that medication.
Yeah, great question. And my recommendation there would be focus on foundations first and foremost. So when I mention foundations, I'm thinking about things like regulating blood sugar for a really important key foundation, whether you're on birth control, you're wanting to transition off, or you've come off and things have gone haywire. So I always say to clients that balancing blood sugar is kind of step number one. It's the don't pass go situation when it comes to supporting, hormone health. It also is really key for supporting our nervous system, for supporting, healthy hormone metabolism in terms of, if our we're riding the blood sugar roller coaster, crashes and lows with blood sugar is going to stimulate a stress response that will impair a lot of processes in the body. If we're dealing with big, spikes and rises, prolonged rises in blood sugar, that can really drive or contribute to a vicious cycle with inflammation, specifically that chronic low grade inflammation. So balancing blood sugar, I would say, is step number one for really supporting your body on birth control. Key things to think about there would be, basic meal timing and meal composition. So I typically recommend in general, aiming to really align your pattern of eating with your circadian rhythm. So having, well-rounded breakfast within an hour or two of waking, and ideally having consistent, well-rounded meals about, every 3 to 5 hours throughout the day from there. And with basic meal composition, ideally thinking about, I always think about my little balanced plate. So having, fourth a plate of high quality protein, fourth a plate of a fiber rich carbohydrate or kind of slow burning carbohydrate, having some complementary fats, nice half plate of non-starchy vegetables. So I think starting with the foundations is really key. Before we get into the weeds with prioritize these foods or prioritize these micronutrients, because then we miss the forest for the trees. We'll work with a lot of women that are taking that micro focus where they're, aiming to incorporate all these specific foods for supporting hormones, but we're skipping breakfast. We're not eating enough protein. And, that foundation is shaky, and blood sugar imbalance will disrupt things 100% of the time. So focus on those foundations. And then, from a nutrient perspective, for really better supporting the body on birth control, I would recommend focusing on incorporating high quality animal foods, which I know is a little bit controversial, and there's a lot that goes into decisions around consumption of animal foods. But speaking strictly from a bioavailable nutrient perspective, undeniably things like our high quality beef and poultry and fish and eggs are going to be really supportive for kind of combating some of those nutrient deficiencies that can occur while on hormonal birth control. I also think about mineral rich foods being really key. So thinking about things like, pumpkin seeds, avocado, dark leafy greens, thinking about even, mineral support from a supplemental perspective. I know electrolytes and mineral powders are really popular now, which can be, an excellent supplement as well. So those are some things that come to mind for me. I'd say foundations with blood sugar first, and then starting to focus on some of those micro strategies with mineral rich foods, other mineral rich foods too, like root vegetables, fruit, are really great. And then if we want to get even a little bit more micro, even foods that support like the liver gallbladder. So bitter foods, your bitter greens are really great. So things like, arugula and endive and dandelion greens. So those bitter stimulating foods can really help with supporting the liver gallbladder bile flow when we have those synthetic hormones in the body as well.
Got it. No, that I appreciate you walking through that. When someone comes in to see you, is there one of those you tend to find more absent in the diet than others? Like, what are some of the things you think, if I'm listening to this and it's like, okay, that's a decent list. Like, what would you say are some of the things that, a higher percentage of time are showing up as they're just nowhere near where you would like them to be or where their body needs them to be as far as have it be, a macro or micronutrient? Like, are there any sources you see there?
Yeah, I would say honestly the biggest gaps that we see are the things that are like the least sexy and least exciting, but protein, honestly, and
Yeah.
high quality protein being huge, and being really huge for supporting blood sugar, but also getting those bioavailable nutrients, our B vitamins. So I'd say optimizing protein intake is huge, and then again, not super sexy or exciting, but I would also say fiber, total fiber intake, diversity with types of fiber sources. That's another, kind of big one that is lacking. And, I didn't, I guess, speak to that specifically. I mentioned, some of our plant foods in terms of root vegetables, non-starchy vegetable seeds, things that contain fibers, but supporting the body on birth control, an emphasis on fiber and diversity with fiber is a great focus for combating some of those negative microbial shifts. Fiber is also great for supporting the healthy elimination of hormone waste products, and the metabolites in terms of the breakdown products or byproducts of toxins and medications and things that the body is breaking down as well. So I'd say fiber and protein. Focus on fiber and
Yeah.
protein first and foremost.
No, it's interesting because a lot of you know, people I talk to, both men and women, it's easy to get overwhelmed with this stuff, especially if you're just in your routine and you got kids and work and you're trying to be healthy and fit. And then I saw this TikTok about this, I saw this clip about this, and you know, eat oatmeal, don't eat oatmeal, you drink water, don't drink water, it's all this
Yeah.
stuff. But I just try to tell people like, okay, like, first off, hire a coach, hire an expert, work with someone.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
But before you do that, or as you're trying to get ready to do that, set a daily protein target and fiber target. Because
Yep.
a lot of people mentally struggle with the word diet and like, well, if you tell me I can't have it, then I'm gonna have it. I'm gonna want it. It's like, okay, well, shift that and just, let's just say on average, you're taking in 50, 60 grams of protein. You need to be at 130, arguably. Let's try to get to 100,
Yeah.
90. Let's just try to get you there, and then let's get to that 25 grams of fiber a day. Let's start really basic. Maybe even 20.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I think if people can reverse it to focus on what's missing first, by eating more of the things that are missing, you're going to eat less of the bad stuff or the not
Yep.
as good stuff. And then, as you were mentioning, right, like then you're going to feel more full. You're going to feel more energetic. Your what is it? NEAT is going to go up. Just
Yep.
your general activity, your energy. So yeah, and I think you're spot on too with the whole nother probably 20-minute rabbit hole we can go down about hormone methylation and all
Yeah.
that. But I'm sure we'll get to some parts of that. I did want to ask just one more transitional question now. So that was, I think, really helpful. Now, is there anything different or common you're using when someone, or even maybe your personal story? Because I know there's nuance to everybody and their situation's unique in most cases, but maybe are there some patterns you see when a woman's coming off birth control that they can do to help mitigate some of the issues like you
Ooh, I just lost your audio.
All right, am I back?
You're back.
All right. I bumped the cord there. Oops. So my question was, when women are coming off birth control, are there things that maybe they could do to mitigate some of those risks or issues that pop up from either combination of nutrition, lifestyle, et cetera, that you commonly use, or maybe you personally used to help them as they're kind of coming off for some of those, you know, abrupt changes when they're transitioning off of a therapy like birth control, especially long-term use?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say some common, dynamics or patterns we see are one, I would say issues with estrogen as a whole. So, post birth control, estrogen is typically the first hormone that's bouncing back, and it's an adjustment. It's a stressor for the body in terms of getting used to actually breaking down and processing this estrogen, and hormones aren't always bouncing back perfectly, optimally in terms of production and metabolism. So I'd say issues with estrogen definitely often drive a lot of those symptoms that women are experiencing post birth control as they're getting their period back and things are kind of recalibrating, along with low progesterone. And this is sort of the double whammy situation where we have issues with estrogen or estrogen breakdown as well as low progesterone. So in terms of how to support that, I would say, a lot of what I had just mentioned for sure would be a big emphasis with make sure that you are. So again, it's coming off birth control is a stressor for the body. So ideally, we want to reduce stress from any other angle we can. And the basics like balancing blood sugar, making sure we're eating enough daily, we're getting enough protein, we're getting enough fiber. These are actually strategic ways that we can reduce stress on the body. I see post pill symptoms be a lot worse for women if they come come off and they're low grade under eating, or their intake is inadequate in terms of actually supporting their level of physical activity. All of these things are going to disrupt our hormones, our stress hormones, our sex hormones. And it just kind of amplifies everything that happens post birth control. So I would say really focusing on adequate nourishment, consistency there, and reducing stress from a variety of angles. Prioritize nervous system support. This is what, one of the most challenging things often for clients to prioritize, because it often doesn't feel as, productive as, the tactical things with food and supplements and, workouts. But really prioritize your nervous system. And whether that means, your morning or evening routines and finding, ways to downregulate that feel really good for you. It could be, meditation. It could be breath work. It could be journaling. It could be, laying in the grass and doing absolutely nothing but breathing and connecting with your body. But, ultimately prioritizing the nervous system is huge for navigating that transition, I find. One other interesting thing I'll point out, that there isn't, we don't really have studies to my knowledge to actually really assess this, but I've done a lot of testing with women kind of pre and post birth control in terms of supporting women with coming off birth control. And one of the most common patterns or trends I see, particularly with gut testing, is that post birth control, when women are coming off, I'm seeing these crazy high steatocrit levels. So, which is an indication of fat malabsorption or some issues with the gallbladder bile flow. And that really can just, amplify hormonal symptoms, but also really contribute to, gut specific symptoms, nutrient deficiencies. And that's where some additional love for the liver and gallbladder, can be helpful. Like I mentioned, bitter supportive foods, castor oil packs are a great tool. But that's just an interesting trend or pattern I've seen with tests over the years.
Oh, that's great. I do want to pull this up too and those of you who are listening on audio, you can find this in Jillian's link tree. So we'll definitely put that in the show notes. But, just for those out there that can see this or are listening, you have a post pill like supplement guide here that, I think is super helpful too. Cause obviously you're covering a lot of ground with there's a lot of different things that could be going on there that could be overwhelming for someone who maybe hasn't unpacked it, but, providing grocery store lists specific to post pill birth control, meal planning, recipes, other modifications. So I think for those of you that are really looking for that, obviously hire somebody that can assist you, but there's also some like Jillian, or there's also some good guides out there too that you could check out. So I think that's a great resource for people to take a look and kind of help organize a lot of this. Cause if some are like, hey, I kind of want to do it on my own and maybe not ready to jump in with a full coaching plan, still start with maybe start with a guide, start with some resources, just kind of get moving in that direction. If you're having success, awesome. But if you feel like, hey, now I'm going to invest in this, I always just try to encourage people to hire someone who has the heart of a teacher so they can teach you how to do these things long term and layer it into your lifestyle. So that's good stuff. Are there any what would be like your number two? So we talked about like disruptors out there in women's health, being birth control being a big one. What would you say would be like your number two disruptor that you see that causes a lot of issues for women, hormonally, and just kind of all the common issues that we're kind of seeing right now in women's health?
Yeah, I would say I don't know how to choose here. Let's prioritize. But other factors that we see really contributing to hormonal imbalance, these women's health dynamics. I I guess I could bundle this into one thing in terms of neglecting foundations. And I know I keep emphasizing these foundations, but the foundation of functional medicine is diet and lifestyle. So I think we see so much of an emphasis on the supplements, which absolutely play an important role, but
Sure.
these supplements are going to be that much more effective if we're really supporting our nutrition and lifestyle foundations. But, it's the big theme when I'm on the phone with potential clients talking through their case is they've, taken a boatload of supplements and they've been eliminating all the foods. And so to your point, I think there's so much out there that is rooted in elimination, restriction, deprivation. But the real needle movers with women and these women's health dynamics and symptoms is that addition nutrition approach. So how can I better support and nourish my body? What can I add? And using tools like supplements as a tool and not the primary intervention. But I think, a lot of us were looking for that quick fix, right? And, we want that instant gratification. And unfortunately, hormones in our bodies don't work that way. And so it really has to be the full spectrum of support. And it doesn't mean being perfect with your diet or lifestyle. I don't feel perfection really exists. I'm not perfect by any means, but it's about, finding that consistent pattern with your nutrition and lifestyle, and then using these tools as a complement. So yeah, overlooking the foundations, I would say, is huge. And the big ones being imbalanced blood sugar, which, I feel like solves like 50% of women's symptoms when we're supporting blood sugar well. I'd say another huge disruptor of hormones is disrupted circadian rhythms. And a lot of times clients might be doing all the things with food, a lot of other lifestyle support, but our circadian rhythms are disrupted. And we're on our, phone, doom scrolling late into the night, blue light glued to our face. We wake up in the morning, we're immediately on screens, we get very little sunlight exposure. And I feel strongly that circadian rhythm disruption is a huge driver of hormonal imbalance and something that is just often, very overlooked.
Yeah, no, I agree. With I think that's a good one. Because like you said, there's a mixed bag of so many, unfortunately, so many things working against us, in our new modern world. But there's also a lot of utility and good stuff there. It's just trying to balance it. What it, definitely you want to do the non-supplemental natural lifestyle stuff is definitely the pillar there. I'm curious if someone's really struggling and they're trying to get to that point and they're just like, I just need some relief. Like I need to jumpstart my circadian rhythm, or if you will, are there any tools, supplements, or just daily practices that you will implement to help get them on the path a little bit, sooner, or give them a little bit of hope, a little bit of relief? What does that look like when it comes to circadian rhythm?
Yeah. So when it comes to circadian rhythms, I'd say I'm not utilizing supplements, I'd say, directly for supporting circadian rhythms. There's supplements like melatonin, if appropriate, that can be helpful for kind of supporting and resetting circadian rhythms. But I would say when it comes to circadian rhythms, boundaries with phone and device use, and like light regulation. These are the keys. And in terms of a jump start, with supporting circadian rhythms, I think a great place to start is morning light exposure. Aim to wake up around the same time daily and aim to get light exposure soon after waking consistently. Do that for a couple weeks and you will notice a dramatic difference in how you feel, your energy, your mood, your digestion, your stress resilience. If it's pitch black when you wake up, grab a light therapy box, lamp, like a full spectrum light box that emits at least 10,000 lux, which is, kind of intended to simulate the sun. You can keep it on your nightstand, pop it on when your alarm goes off. And that's something that will create a very notable difference, even just doing it consistently for a couple weeks. I definitely will say there are supplements that can be very helpful early on, foundationally. to get some, for lack of a better word, like quick wins or some movement for people that can be really
Sure.
encouraging. I think minerals, that's a big one. So I think, most people are going to benefit from supplemental magnesium, as well as electrolyte or mineral support in terms of, like a mineral powder rich in sodium and potassium. We are all deficient in minerals based on the fact that our soil's depleted and it's harder to get these from food. Stress depletes minerals, and we all have, boatloads of that in our lives. And just repleting minerals on a basic level can make such a huge difference with how people feel. And minerals really help to support cellular hydration. So we're like pulling fluid into our cells, and our body can actually perform, so many important processes and support so many biochemical reactions in the body when it has adequate minerals, some of those macro minerals on a basic level. So, that's something I'd say pretty immediately women often notice a benefit with. Oftentimes with digestion and motility, with energy, with skin, mood, stress resilience, sleep. So I'd say that's something that can, be helpful for getting the ball rolling with, feeling encouraged, and having that kind of snowball into other healthy habits.
Yeah. Do you find like if we take like a supplement or a mineral like magnesium, is it just, hey, we just got to get your daily amount up more, or do you generally will you try to time it like maybe some that are more correlated with relaxation, rest, like to take it at night, things like
Yep.
that? Are you doing some timing with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a there's many different types of magnesium. Some can be definitely more helpful for kind of having a calming effect, which we'd want to take in the evening. Magnesium glycinate is a great one, that is commonly talked about, very accessible, that you can take in the evening. Dosing will depend on the person, but like a good starting point would be like 400 milligrams magnesium glycinate in the evening. Take it like an hour before bed, and that can be really helpful for supporting sleep, stress reduction, calm. So that would probably be a good starting point for someone like new to magnesium. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. And just going back to the morning sunlight thing, I mean, I think that's under, I don't know how to word it, underutilized, underappreciated, what have you. Cause for me, even, a lot of work doing it, if I'm doing it from home or I have like dark in the morning travel, to where I'm going, I definitely could tell a difference if I don't have it in our routine to get out. And I think like the analogy I was thinking about the other day, or the example is, we all know it. We're taught this when we're kids, like you have to walk your dog, right? Like, well, why do you have to
Yeah.
walk your dog? And they talk about like all the sensory experience and the smells and the lights and the activity and the, um, uh, the brain being stimulated and the air hitting them and all that. And I think of like, obviously perfect world, we definitely just want to at least get sunlight, but even like a short, like a 10-minute walk,
Yeah.
get your body moving in the morning. I noticed the benefits greatly. Not only is it obviously in the literature, but just anecdotally, and maybe some of it's uh placebo, but I'll take it. But I think more so than not, it's more effective where I'm more alert,
Oh yeah.
more just the air on your face, whether it's hot or cold, um, and the light and a little bit of movement, and you're kind of, not on a carpet, walking like where I live, it's like a dirt road, and then there's like a nice trail right by, so it's different terrain, so it's making my body and all those little things kind of move a little bit, and it doesn't have to be super intense, but um, I just find it interesting. Like you look at basic CDC guidelines, that is just, hey, this is like basic general health that every American should do. And the most recent stat I saw was 20%, only 20% of women achieve the basic, like the minimum. I think men was 23 or 24%.
Wow.
So we're not much better.
Yeah.
Um, and that's mainly because a lot of guys are just, they grew up with Conan the Barbarian and,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So they,
Yeah.
they they still want to, lift or Rambo or Commando in the 80s. If I date myself a little bit. Um, so they're doing a little more lifting, but they still, me included, like it's something I've changed the last 5 years, but definitely can easily forget about cardio and some of the other health
Yeah.
benefits on top of lifting. But yeah, no, I think those are really sound practical advice to kind of just start somewhere. Like that's the key with
Yeah.
people is just, start somewhere, get moving. Like we talked about, if it's protein and fiber, just have more than what you had the week before. If it's
Yeah.
sunlight, start with sunlight. And then if it's, can you sunlight? Can you walk into the driveway and back? Cool. Can you, next, can you go to the corner? Can you work that into your schedule? Maybe, maybe not. Like, and what do these things look like,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and
um,
it's the like I always say your health is in your habits, and it's more often than not the small habits and the small decisions we make, even if it's just, 5-10 minute walk, might not feel huge in the moment, but these kind of small habits and strategies really accumulate over time, and the return on investment with your health is massive. But sometimes it's hard to see that in the moment, right? Especially if we're not feeling great, we're experiencing symptoms, and we just want to feel better, right?
sure.
But yeah, those small habits are so key. And to even, build on that with the walking, there was a study that came out a few years ago that had found that even 2 to 5 minutes of either walking or just standing after eating
Mm,
produced something like a 30+% decrease in post meal blood sugar levels.
yeah.
And just how cool is that in terms of, you don't have to go out for a 30-minute walk, but could we stand up and walk around, or yeah, go to the mailbox, do a loop around the block, 2 to 5 minutes, and that's a huge, huge impact, on post meal blood sugar. So
Yeah. I'm grateful that I have a flexible family because, um, I remember like even when our girls were really young, I just, not only knowing that, but I just always wanted to move after a meal. And then, of course, being in our space, like you see the benefits. So then it's like reinforcing that annoying behavior for my wife, I'm sure. So like now it's cool to where she's like, I know, like, let's go. And I'm like, all right, girl. Like, and so sometimes even we'll, try to do that together. But it's always a challenge if you go out to eat, because it's like, yeah, walk into the car or whatever, but I have to like move around. Like I'll go to the restroom just to wash my hands and just move around. Even if I don't have to
yep,
use it or whatever, just like, all right, I have to get some kind of movement because you can feel those things. You're less lethargic. A lot of
yep,
people don't realize like insulin has a sedative type effect. So if your insulin spiked and over spiked, that's why you get sleepy and tired. Um, Things like that. And just getting that movement, like you said, digestion, just feeling better. Um, you're not as antsy, not as, yeah,
oh yeah.
we all know that feeling.
And that's the thing. Once start with these small habits and you experience kind of the benefits, the proof is in the pudding, and your body starts to really crave those things, which is cool. And that's where I always say, treat the next week or 2 weeks as an experiment and try that light exposure, or try that, quick post meal, lap around the block, and just experiment and see what type of evidence your body gives you from that. And yeah, I feel like it just your body starts to crave it.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely, the more small wins and successes you have, the more your identity starts to change a little bit, where I'm going from, and I'll use a parallel for myself in a minute, but like someone who's maybe going from like they've told themselves, or maybe they have been, but they've kind of accepted this identity of like, I'm unhealthy, I eat like crap, I have bad habits, blah, 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 blah. But if they can start getting some of those smaller things, I think even subconsciously you start to like embracing the next one. So I think for encouragement for people out there, it's like, okay, you just did your walk, like you said, did some stuff. It does change even on like a subconscious level. Like I can remember, I still have a long journey ahead of me, but I had the bright idea in my 40s to start training jujitsu. And for like the first year, yeah, definitely the first year, I forced myself to go. And then as I got like, promoted as far as like levels, and I'm still like have a long way to go with my journey. But as soon as I hit a certain level, it was now part of like my identity where I was like, oh, I'm like, I do jujitsu. That's part of what I think
Yeah.
I'm a jujitsu guy. And it just changed my approach to where it was now like into my, without like consciously doing it, was just into like what I do, who I am. I made friends there, that whole thing. So I think similarly, you can take that, and drop it into different aspects of life, whether it's, walking, these healthy habits, we're talking about food, like these are just the things I do. And oftentimes you can be a really positive impact on your family, too. And
Yeah.
even like think of like what's coming up right now this time of year. all these holiday meals and stuff. We don't have to go in there and have people feel criticized or judged, but they're going to notice if you're kind of loading the plate a little different this year. They're like, oh, what's going on there? Everyone wants to be healthy, right? It's
Yeah.
just a little bit of confusion. It's at first, how do you get that momentum going? How do you get Big Mo to start moving, right? And if
Yep.
we can get that going, good things happen. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask, just kind of transition. We talk a lot about like things people can do, um, good things. And I know we have a list that we won't get to. We probably turn this into like a 3-hour discussion if I was trying to get to all of them. But one of the things I thought would be interesting to share with the audience is like a myth. You can pick two if you want, but just, is there a myth out there that is in the women's health space, or it's comes up on social, or clients you're talking to, that you just wish would just die and go away, and you're like, okay, so this is not true, this isn't how it works, but it's kind of a common thread that you see out there? Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that jumps to my mind is just the, like, chronic fear mongering around carbs,
Mm,
and women as a whole, it being so ingrained that carbs are the devil, and I think misinformation on social media, and I even think, unfortunately, in our healthcare system too, there's just a lot of not great recommendations given out there by people that aren't extensively trained in nutrition, or just shouldn't be giving nutrition advice. And I feel like we work with so many women that are just extremely fearful of carbs, and are drastically under eating carbohydrates, and that's a big piece of why they are experiencing symptoms, why they are, their thyroid is sluggish, their digestion is sluggish, they're having difficulty building lean muscle. So that is probably one of the biggest ones.
got it. Yeah, and as far as so you're when you work through that to unpack it, like what are some of the steps someone can take who maybe has had that fear, that obsession? Like, is there any kind of approaches you take to help them adapt to that? I would imagine some of it's probably explaining the difference in carbohydrates, I would assume, but what, as far as like, yeah, well, if you go eat a, bag of Skittles and, whatever, this is not what we're talking about here. We're
Yeah.
talking about carbohydrates, but like, does anything come to mind there?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, education, and even understanding, what carbs are, why they're important, and how much an individual might actually need. Because I think there's absolutely nuance when it comes to carbohydrate needs, and it's not to say that there's never a situation where, say, a lower carb approach is can't be warranted. But I think what I find specifically is that when women are thinking about carbs, the thought process is just the lower the better. And it's sort of this arbitrary, long term like diet that women are on, sometimes intentionally and sometimes like unintentionally, based on like, diet culture messaging and things just ingrained over the years, where it's just the avoidance of carbohydrates overall. So I think actually, education and understanding, what carbs are, how much carbs my body needs, and just
Yeah.
the awesome benefits of carbohydrates in terms of when we are eating enough to support our body, when we're pairing carbohydrates, we're eating high quality carbohydrates rich in fiber, so a lot of whole food sources of carbs, we're pairing it with adequate protein and non-starchy veg. And so I think it's, yeah, a lot of misinformation there as a whole. And I think women are always surprised too that in literature, and there's some variation here, but like low carb diets are generally kind of identified as being below like 140 grams carbs per day. And again, there's some variation there. And a lot of times when I'm working with women and we're kind of breaking down what sort of a low carb diet is by definition, and what they're eating, they're shocked, in terms of, they thought low carb was like just cut them all out.
Yeah, like 0. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I think, like, the thing I noticed with I would say more like general population, maybe someone who maybe hasn't studied exercise science or physiology or something like that, is that a lot of times they tend to, men and women, not realize the cycle that is our bodies, if you will, or how this affects this, which affects this, which affects, it's like everything's an interplay in our body. It's like,
Mhm.
and I'll just use the analogy with guys. Like men will understand it in a car, and then you explain to them and their body like, oh, that works that way. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
like come on, man. Like, so, but and so I think as you're describing that, like, right, like let's walk through what we've talked about so far. So you're not getting enough protein. If you're the average woman in America, you're not getting enough protein, definitely not getting enough fiber. We know this. Micronutrients are deficient. We just talked about you're only 20% of you are reaching the minimum like resistance training and activity levels as far as general health guidelines. We're not talking like misfit woman out there who's going after some modeling gig or some going to go on stage for some muscle competition. We're talking a minimum. And then if you correlate that with all these things play with insulin response, blood sugar, it's not, to your point, it's not inherently bad, the carbohydrate, but if you have a poor insulin response, or, I like to use the gas tank analogy. Like if I have, 80 pounds of lean, or well, 60 pounds, 70 pounds of lean mass on a frame, that space, that muscle can store only a certain amount of those carbohydrates, which pulls it out of the blood, lowering the blood sugar, et cetera. So if we can grow those storages as well, then in the process of growing them, we're also burning more through resistance training, then it's going to be less problematic. And so I think it's like, it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. Like you have to do 90 minutes of Susie Q's boot camp 5 days a week. Right. And then
Right.
you have to eat grass and drink water all day. Like
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
we can slowly blend all this, or someone
Yeah.
like yourself can slowly blend this. That's where coaching and guidance to kind of layer it into your lifestyle. It's like, yeah, just like we do with a retirement plan, right? Like you just build the basics. Like, okay, this is where I'm at in life financially. Like, here's the basics. But over time, you get more advanced and you add more things and do more things. So I think that I just share some of that as like encouragement for people to say, like, you're not necessarily a failure, and it's like you're not um hopeless, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, I just can't, this doesn't work for me. Well, yeah, that one thing didn't work for you because there's 7 other things that you want to make sure are rowing in the right direction,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, completely. And I think, yeah, like, being methodical and even just like order of operations is really important. And, working with clients directly, we are not, telling them to do all of these things tomorrow. We are
Right.
choosing 1 or 2 things to work on. After we meet, we're implementing, we're experimenting, we're regrouping what worked well, what didn't work well. And it's oftentimes we're kind of reining clients in a little bit in terms of like, let's pare it back and just focus on these things and then we'll build. And that's, to your point with like the retirement analogy, which I love. It's important to kind of build over time, not try to, do too much at once. But it's true too that I think there's certain things that if something is not in place, it can sort of sabotage another like goal or effort. And I think about the carbohydrate piece of things, where oftentimes, like, if we see women like really drastically under eating carbohydrates, they're starting the day eating low carb, and then by the end of the day they're like white knuckling it, and their sugar cravings and carb cravings are through the roof. And
Yep.
then we're overeating, we're making reactive decisions, and then we're beating ourselves up about it. I have no willpower, yada yada, and then it's this vicious cycle. But if we were to maybe focus on, okay, let's, within an hour or two of waking, let's have, a well-rounded breakfast with a great protein source, a great carbohydrate source, like a full, well-rounded meal. Let's nail that first and then, make changes from there. So it's
Sure.
also, yeah, it's about, kind of setting ourselves up for success and not trying to like willpower it through, or white knuckle it rather, through changes. It shouldn't feel, changing our habits, I will not say is easy, but it shouldn't feel hard in the sense that you're like trying to fight against your body to make these changes. Ideally, we need to work within the context of what you're already doing and kind of, layer to set you up for success.
Yeah, I know, because as you mentioned, right, like and you almost want to have those tools in the toolbox, or if you will, or those adjustments delayed, layering them into a plan so that the body can continue to progress as well. Because I mean, that was one of the best things that I personally even had from a coach, that I was doing a certain competition, and I knew a lot about the topic and the competition and how to get ready for it. But I was like, I need a coach. And actually, there were several times where my diet was less aggressive than I thought it was going to be, and I would have made it. And then even like my cardio and activity plan, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do more, because it was just, that's the motivation part. That's the,
Yeah,
oh, I'm going to work hard now. Oh, I lost a little more body fat. Oh, I like the way this is looking, or this is coming in. I'm going to push a little more. It's like, no, 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 we're not going to push more. I'm like, okay. So I think even people like us who've been, in a similar space for a long time, working with, others to kind of guide and coach us through it. Cause we all have those voices, either don't do anything or do too much.
yeah,
It's hard to find that sweet spot. Right.
totally. Yep.
Well, I know we're coming up on time, but I want to take a few moments just to, for those out there, to introduce some of your resources here. So I'm going to go to your, let's see here. I'm going to go to your Instagram first. So let's pull this up. So for those of you who are listening on audio, this is just Jillian Greaves RD on Instagram. A lot of great resources here. A couple topics we did not get to today yet, but I was, definitely encourage people to check out. A lot on PCOS, gut microbiome, and acne. So we'll definitely have to maybe circle back in the future and open up that discussion. But looking at your site too, there's a lot of different newsletters, guides, things people can check out. We already mentioned the post birth control meal guide that you have there. Is there anything else to point out as far as where people, or maybe if you wouldn't mind giving us a high level of all of your
Yeah.
services, where people can find you, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit more. So yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, Jillian Greaves RD, and then you can check out my website, which is just jilliangreaves.com, and you can learn more about kind of our services. We offer one-on-one functional nutrition coaching. We also have a PCOS group program, the PCOS Root Reversal program. And then we have a lot of free resources. So we have the post-birth control meal plan and supplement guide. We have a balancing blood sugar, which I know we talked about a lot today, but balancing blood sugar guide. And then just a lot of articles on various topics, recipes, and just free resources to check out.
Awesome. Yeah. And then you have, just to give her a shout out, where is she? Down here somewhere, I think. One of your sites, your other
practitioner. Yep.
practitioner.
So yeah, I have a couple practitioners on my team. Courtney, who you were just highlighting, Courtney Kayers, the clinical lead on our team, and she is incredible. She's been with me 5 years now, and yeah, she's amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, good stuff. No, I appreciate you coming on, and just for everybody out there, we're going to have links to everything, in the show notes, the guides. Definitely a couple other things I'm sure we could unpack and get to in the future as well. But any other closing thoughts, tips, words of encouragement, etc., that come to mind for the audience out there?
Oh man, I feel like we covered a lot, but I guess last message or thought would be, if you're struggling to find answers and, feeling a little bit hopeless, just want to provide, some words of encouragement in terms of, symptoms don't happen for no reason. There is always a reason in my mind. And, it may be a matter of just getting the right support and finding answers, but you deserve to feel amazing. And hopefully, the episode today gave you some great kind of starting points, to kickstart your journey.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate having you on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the channel. Send us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them, or connect you with Jillian. We'll reach out and get those answers for you, or send you a link to maybe some of her resources to help you. So definitely don't be shy. We get a lot of emails, not quite as many comments that we would gratefully accept, if you will, and love to engage with you further. All of our wonderful audience that supports the show. So we appreciate all of you out there. And thanks again for tuning into the First Optimal podcast. We'll see you guys. Take care.